Hi, this is Gary. You're watching a poker tutorial on risk versus return. In this tutorial, we're going to take a look at the concept of risk versus return, and then we're going to give some examples as far as after the chips went in, and we'll take a look at a way to calculate risk versus return before the chips went in. The examples I'm going to use are from my book, Poker Hand Ranges Explained, which is available on lulu.com. Now, risk versus return is not very common, or not a term that's commonly used in poker, but it is actually a very, very common term in the world of finance, which happens to be my major, and investing. When you set together a portfolio of assets, you always look at what your risk is versus your expected return, and you want to try to generate the highest expected return for a given level of risk. We're going to take a look at how to calculate risk and return for a small amount of or a portfolio of poker decisions. So let's go ahead and start here. Risk equals 1 minus our equity in the hand. It's defined as our chances of losing, and we prefer not to lose or to manage our volatility in a good way. If you want to get technical with this formula, you can argue that tie equity doesn't count as part of the risk, and you are correct, but for simplistic version, we're going to use the 1 minus our equity in the hand formula. Now, return, on the other hand, is going to be our actual hand value in terms of big blind divided by the actual number of big blinds we put in the pot, and then that number is -1. Now we would calculate that based on how much our hand is worth, based on how much equity we have in the hand, and multiply that times the total pot. I'm going to go ahead and shrink this down here. And we're going to take a look at an example. Our first example, we're going to have pocket aces versus pocket kings. Now, in order to make this simpler, I'm going to use an 80% equity assumption instead of the 81-ish percent equity we would have in this case. It just makes the calculations easier. So the risk is going to be defined as 1 minus 80. That's our equity in the hand, and that equals 20%. So we have a 20% chance of loss, or a 20% volatility. Now our return equals our hand value of 100 big blinds times 2, because there's 2 players, and then times the 80% equity we have. So it's going to be 200 times 80%, which is going to come out to a total of 160 big blinds. So that is our return. We're getting 160 big blinds, and we're putting 100 big blinds in the pot. Now, if you remember the formula we had, it's on the right hand corner of the bottom. We take the 160, we divide it by 100 big blinds, and then we go ahead and we subtract 1, and that's going to give us a total of 60%. So our return on this is 60%, and we're taking 20% risk. So we're getting about 3 to 1 on a return. Now this is after the chips went in. Our next example is going to look at how we would calculate risk versus return before the chips went in. I'm going to go ahead and shrink this down here, and we're going to take a look at another example coming up. Okay, I trust you've had a little bit of time to look at the example here. It's basically lag opens for 5 big blinds with a 15% range. Everyone else is folded. We have ace-king suited. The lag calls an all-in with ace-queen plus, 10-10 plus, so about 4.7% of the range. And we have approximately 40 big blinds in our stack. What we want to do is we want to calculate the risk versus return of making an all-in shove in this situation. I'm going to go ahead and shrink that down here. Now on the top left-hand corner, I have a breakdown of the legs calling big bets range, and that comes out to 4.7% for our example. As you can see, the percentages there, or actually it's 4.68%. And we also have ace-king's equity versus that range, and the red boxes are the ones that, the combos that the lag would call with. And what this means is the lag is going to fold 69% of the time, and they're going to call approximately 31% of the time. So about almost 70% of the time we're going to win the big blinds by shoving. This big spreadsheet box I've made larger over here gives us a breakdown of our total weighted equity, which is going to come out to 51.74%. And this is against a range of hands that the loose aggressive player would call with. We could have as low as 12.1% equity against aces. There's only 3 combos of that. Or we could have as high as 75.6% equity against ace-queen offsuit. There's 9 combos of that. If you look below, the leg is going to fold approximately 69% of the time. So the 69% of the time the leg folds, we have 100% equity and a 45 pot. Our adjusted value of that happening is 31.1. When the leg calls, we're going to have 51.7% equity, and that's going to happen. The pot's going to be 80, and that's going to happen approximately 31% of the time, which is the weight below there. And the adjusted value for that is 12.8. If you take the 12.8 number and you add it to the 31.1 number, our expected ending stack after an all-in shove is going to be 43.9, and we will use those two numbers when we go back to the next page in just a few seconds here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and clear the stuff out in the top left-hand corner, and we are going to figure out what our expected return is. Now, if you remember earlier from our demo here, return is hand value in big blinds divided by actual big blinds put in the pot, and then minus 1. Our hand value is 43.9 big blinds in this situation, and our actual big blinds put in the pot is 40. Divide that and subtract by 1, you get 9.75%. Now, if you remember from our earlier portion of the tutorial, our risk is defined as 1 minus our equity in the hand. So first of all, we're going to start off with 1 minus 0.5174, which is our weighted equity against its calling range, and that equals 0.4826. But you say, wait a minute, that's not the right number, and no, it's not. We have to take the 0.4826 number, and we have to factor in the fact that we're getting called only 31% of the time. So our risk is going to be 0.31 times the 0.486 number I've highlighted in blue and red, those two numbers there, and that's going to come out to a grand total of 15%. So our net risk is 15% here. So our answer to this question is that shoving 40 big blinds on average will yield a 9.75% return with 15% risk. Now, if you look at the actual distribution of the shove, it's going to look something like this. 69 times, so we end up with a 45 big blind stack. There's no call there. 16 times we end up with 80 big blinds, and we haven't factored in rake. That's because we win the showdown. And 15% or 15 times we end up with no big blinds. We lose the showdown because of how our hand matches up. And this is going to conclude our tutorial for risk and return. I would just point out that you want to try to manage your volatility. Even if you are doing something that is positive equity, try to keep in mind how much risk you have, because that can skew the volatility of your results. It's okay when you're winning, but when you start losing, that's not a good thing. Thank you for watching.